Last weekend I raced at Oulton Park, and that's provided the opportunity for me to compare my experience with a real BMW 116 round Oulton Park versus the Assetto Corsa model that I had created, which is a hacked version of a Mazda Miata or MX-5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison, and I will, towards the end of this video, I'll drop in details about where to get the Assetto Corsa model. Here we are approaching Lodge on the just coming up to start the lap. What you see in the top half of the screen, you see the Assetto Corsa model, and in the bottom half, obviously, that's me driving last weekend. So let's just watch this all the way through, and then we'll go over it bit by bit. Before we start the detailed analysis, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. I'd been practicing this track on Assetto Corsa with my 116 model, and I was using third gear around the corner that you see directly ahead of us, which is turn 1, which is Old Hall. And when I first arrived at Oulton Park, I did use third gear around this corner and round Cascades, which we'll touch on in a second. But as time went on, and after chatting to a few people, I realised that I can go around this in fourth. In fact, when I'd raced on this circuit before, I was using fourth round turn 1. So I switched. So that's one thing. But what I did find is that when I tried to do this on, when I did it on Assetto Corsa, when I was practicing this for this video, it was quite challenging getting around it in fourth, although I did eventually manage it. And it did seem okay. It seemed quite fast, actually. The corner I had more trouble with is Cascades, which you see here is turn 3. So again, I used third gear initially, both in the sim and on the track, but on the track I eventually switched to using fourth, although I'm not completely sure that was correct. But anyway, that's what I did. And the other thing I should point out is this is the island configuration. So you see it's got the tight hairpin. I also got a top tip from my mate Matt about taking Cascades and Druids Corner, which you see on the diagram up on the top right. And that was to just go into it and just lay your foot on the brake to transfer the weight to the front, but don't brake too hard. And I found that really difficult to replicate in the sim, and in fact you'll see when we come to analyse it that I don't really do that with my sim session. My pedals are okay, they're Fanatec pedals, but I don't have a load cell or anything, and I think that's why there's such a difference. Right, let's get into it. So this lap at the real lap on the bottom screen, or the bottom half, was my fastest allowed qualifying lap. I had one slightly faster, but it was disallowed for track limits. So we're going into the first corner. You see we're doing fourth gear, and it's pretty much the same. Let's now slow this up as we go into cascades. So the first thing you notice, the throttle is flat out in both of them at the moment. I seem to come off the throttle slightly earlier in real life. On the brakes, I just give them a stab on the sim, but I hold them into the corner in real life. And as I said, in fact, I'm trying to think if I was actually doing the laying my foot on the brakes in that session, because I definitely did it during the race. I did it round Druids, which we will touch on in a second, but maybe not so much there. But you can see that difference. Now we're coming into the hairpin, and I can't detect a difference here. It seems pretty much identical. I think I'm slightly ahead in the sim session actually. So you see I changed gear slightly earlier from the video point of view, but probably not from track position. Okay, I've stopped it here because I think there's some track inaccuracies here. You see the 100 board on the sim session. I found that the place to brake, the latest place I could brake, was midpoint between this 100 board and the 50 board in the sim session. But if you look down below, you can see the one on the left, the board there, I think it's got a single stripe, so I take it that's 100 meters, and I was braking at that point. Now the reason they're out of sync here is because I'm a bit ahead in the sim session. I catch up a bit later, but I'm a bit ahead. So yeah, that looks like a track inaccuracy, but that was one big difference I noticed, the braking point into what is the Hislop chicane. Okay, so now we're into the Hislop chicane. This all seems pretty much the same, except there's grass if you look in the sim session to the left of the curb there, and there isn't in real life. Again, I'm still a little bit ahead in the sim here. So coming up here, this all looks pretty much the same. Now we're coming up to the big double apex, which is Druids. Watch the brake trace in the top screen. You'll see a red bar in a minute. So I brake hard in the sim, but if you notice, I just slightly braked as I turned in and laid my foot on the brake. You can see it held for a while. I have to say, actually, in the test session I did something similar to that, but it was still damp and I spun at that corner. But anyway, when I first looked at Druids on the sim versus the video, I thought they're very different, but actually, you know what, looking at it there, I don't think it is that different. I think the sim layout is probably about right. Now we're coming down to the big braking corner, which is Lodge, and I'm going to slow it up here because this is another difference in the track, I believe. In the sim I brake at that Dunlop board on the left, but I seem to brake much later in real life, and the distance between the Marshall post, which you see there in the lower screen, and the corner is different to what it is in the sim. It's the Marshall post too far back, I think. So yeah, that's a slightly different perspective. Going round that last corner, Lodge, was easier in real life than it was in the sim, bizarrely. Okay, and that's the lap. So let's try and summarise. Oulton corner, pretty much the same. Denton's is flat out anyway, so no change. Cascades, pretty much the same, except for the problem with my pedals and not being able to just rest my foot on the brake to drag me into the apex. The hairpin, the same. Hislops, the same except for that breakpoint issue and the boards. They're different. Also, they've removed the tyre barrier from turn 10, which is the right hand into Hislops. But they have put a new tyre barrier on the inside of Knickerbrook, which isn't in the sim. Knickerbrook just the same. The sim model understeers around Knickerbrook, as does my real car. Coming up the hill, Druids, there is the issue with laying your foot on the brake again. Can't do that with my pedal setup. Lodge, the same except for that issue with the Marshall post, I think is in the wrong place, which makes it seem as though the brake point is different. And then everything else, all good. Let's try to compare the data. Now there have been quite a few problems setting this up, and I'll explain as we go along, but let's just try and do some form of comparison. So the first thing is, what's the maximum speed before I hit the brakes at turn 1? And you can see there maximum speed is at 94 meters, and the speed is 143 kilometers an hour. So if I come down, this is the aim data. So this is from my car, my real car. So let's have a look at the sim. That's at 97.5 meters. So supposedly a bit further, although I have to tell you that I'm beginning to wonder about the various reference lines here of, finish line, start finish line, timing line, all those sorts of things, but we're just trying to get a rough idea here. And in this case we've got 140 kph, so we're about 3 kph difference. Now let's do this one first. Minimum speed through the corner. Now this is a bit awkward, this measurement, because this is GPS speed. And when you go through a turn, the GPS speed tends to go a bit haywire because you're turning through the sort of mesh of the GPS. I did cover this in an earlier video. So we can only do this roughly, but we've got 111 kph there, and we've got 113 just about in the sim. Maximum speed going into this will be Cascades, 141.6 versus 141. Yeah, so you can see the speeds are very similar. I've checked through a number of these. Now this area here is a real problem. The problem here is that for some reason the AIM seems to think I'm doing the island circuit, and I'm not. I'm doing the international circuit, and I'm not. I'm doing the island circuit, and so it tries to add in all the sectors, which some of which I've sort of blanked out now, but tries to add in all the sectors of the additional length around the Shell Oils loop, and the other chicane. So in fact, the minimum speed here, which is in the middle of the island bend, is 49, and if we take it on this one it's 45, so slightly slower in real life. Let's go for the maximum speed. Where's this? This is so we've gone up the hill, down the other side, and we're just about to go into the right hand turn of Hislops, and that will correspond to this one here. So that's 135.5, and we've got 139 in the real trace up here, 139. So we've got some discrepancies, but quite honestly, I'm not going to be able to exactly match, as I'm driving the sim versus the real car, I'm not going to be able to exactly match everything. We could look at RPM, but there's a bit of a complication with RPM in that I toe and heel in my sim on my sim setup, but I don't toe and heel in real life because I can't reach the pedal. The pedal spacing is just wrong in my real car, so I don't tend to toe and heel. So it's not easy for us to do an RPM comparison, but I did look at some of the high spots and they are very similar. If you want to try the model yourself, then you need to go to my GitHub repository. You don't need to be a member of GitHub. If you just do github.com Paul Offord like that, and then you need this one, KS Mazda Miata _E87. Click into that. If you go into there, you'll find there is a README file. Take a look at the README file, and it tells you how to install the model. It's just the same as you install any model, really, but it'll give you some details there. So please do that, because you can also give me feedback, which would be good. All right, I think that's it for this time. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.